when I would question, I'd say, if there's no God, how did a stranger call me by name? How did a stranger
Right.
walk up to me right after my prayer and say that God would direct my footsteps? There's
Yep.
no other explanation.
All right, welcome to another Aspen Roots podcast. I'm your host, Brandon, here with my wife, Sophia, and we are so excited to welcome Anela Green onto our podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us, Anela.
Happy to be here.
I need to first start with a story of how we ended up with our first guest who we don't know previously on our podcast. And so it starts on Facebook. I was on Facebook, and if anyone's familiar, Facebook recommends people you may know. And there was one person in that list that had no mutual friends. And I had never seen that before. I was like, why is Facebook recommending someone to me who I have no mutual connections with? And so I got curious and I clicked on the profile. And the first post is Anela sharing a very beautiful story that touched me deeply. It gave me chills. I teared up, and I knew immediately I would at least invite her to retell it on our podcast here. And so thankfully you said yes. But that is how this all came to be, just pretty random. And Anela's going to tell us a story today that is about finding your purpose. It's about prayers being answered, following God's will, bringing that into your life. It's a story about deep suffering. And I know many people who are big into medical medium have experienced that for themselves, myself included, and wavering faith in those times, and how the light of God and the medical medium information can bring us back into full faith and health and joy and happiness. And through that journey, how we can change the world, essentially. So hopefully I said that all pretty well. If there's anything you guys want to add to it, please feel free.
I want to add, I think it's a story about inspiration. I think that as you will tell us your story, I just was very inspired by it.
Now, that means a lot to me. It was inspiring for me too during very dark times. So
Awesome.
I hope that when I tell it, it helps other people too. And I always think that this story is one of those stories that I'll tell to my grandchildren, and they're going to be like, oh, not again. Like, we already heard the story. Listen to my story. I don't have grandchildren yet. So there will
Or
be.
maybe they'll be like, tell us again. Tell us again. We want to hear it again.
Bring your friends.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
We have a 100-year-old friend, and he says, if you've heard this one before, don't stop me. So maybe you can steal that line from him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny.
So yeah, your story starts, what, about 17, 18 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, about 17. I was a young mother. My first son was 4 years old, and I was married. I was in that marriage for 13 years. I felt like my whole purpose was not only serving God, but also being a good mother, being a good wife. And that's where my whole head was at, except for my husband was completely impossible to please no matter what. So I sort of felt defeated at this point because I had tried everything. I loved him so purely. I just wanted to help him, but it was just out of my hands, one of those things that are just out of your hands. And so I had just finished reading this book called The Purpose-Driven Life. It was really popular back then. And so I was inspired by this book, and just something came over me, and I went outside and I sat down in my backyard, and I've never felt the Holy Spirit as strongly as I felt it in that moment. I was looking up into the trees, to the sky, and I was overcome by this feeling of lightness of being, of purity, of purpose, of complete joy. Like
Wow.
something just so powerful overcame me. And I just prayed. I said, God, please just use me. Give me a purpose. Use me. Like, I was begging him for a purpose, just like, but in a very lighthearted way, not in a sad way, it was, it felt beautiful and it felt good. It didn't feel sad or anything, you know? And so I sat there for a while longer, and that was like the most powerful prayer I've ever prayed. And like I said, I've never felt the Holy Spirit as strong as I did in that point to this day.
I love that. Do you have any theories about why that time?
All I can say is that, like I said, I think it was just purity of purpose, you know, and just couldn't have been anything special I did. I can tell you that because I don't know what
Okay.
I'm doing.
Yeah.
but, but I was just, really just wanting so badly to be used for whatever his will was, you know,
Just
and
authenticity. That's what
I
I'm
Yeah, I
guess
was
struck with.
gonna
so.
say, like,
Yeah.
everything just aligned in that moment, it seems like.
Yeah. And so after the prayer, I decided to take my 4-year-old son for a walk. And it was the west side of Kansas City. And there was this little, I don't want to say water park because a very small little fountain that shoots up water that the neighborhood kids can run through if they want. That
Hmm.
sort of gives you a visual. It wasn't a water park.
Yeah.
It was more just like a little splash pad. That's what it was, a
Like a
splash
water
pad.
spot. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So I walked my son down the street and I let him play there just while I sat on the benches and just kept kind of reeling from the prayer that just happened. Right. And so we weren't there very long and I decided to go back home. So got my son, I'm holding his hand. We're walking back and I was probably like 20 feet from the park when this man, I looked up and he's standing in front of me on the sidewalk, and he was an older Latin gentleman with gray, silver hair and wrinkly, beautiful skin. I don't know why I love I don't know. I love old people when their skin is sort of weathered and I don't know
It tells
why.
a story.
In their
It's
hand,
got character.
in their
Yeah.
hands, I like that. But anyways,
Well,
so he had very kind eyes and I just looked up at him and he said, he's, I don't know why it gets me every time I tell that story. He said,
Aw.
I know your name in your face because it was shown to me. Your name is Anela, and that's not the name I was born with, but it's the name that I use on social media platforms. And so I'll just say that here for the story.
cool.
But he said, your name is Anela, and God will direct your footsteps.
Wow.
For a few
Yeah.
seconds, I couldn't breathe. I was just like,
Wow.
I
I
don't
bet.
know what this reality is right now. Right?
Like a complete stranger just
Yeah.
Yeah.
stopping you on the streets, going,
Yeah. And
God showed me. Wow, that's incredible.
and so I just stared at him and when I get excited, I sound like a crazy little girl and I'm just like, you're not gonna believe it. I just said this prayer for you. You're just not gonna, and I told him everything that happened, that I just said the prayer and he just like kind of smiled and nodded and my memory is not that great. I don't remember his face in that moment, but I think I was just so overwhelmed with what was going on.
Yeah.
I would be.
Yeah,
Totally.
It's like an immediate answer to your prayer in a way.
yeah, yeah, which doesn't happen often.
Right.
Right,
That's
exactly.
so
Wow.
something like that, something so physical, and it's not like I heard a voice in my head and I'm sort of wrestling with it was my voice or his voice. It wasn't like
Hmm.
that. It was a stranger coming up to me, telling my name, and answering the prayer I just said. So it was really amazing.
Wow.
Incredible.
That
Yeah.
is incredible.
So after he spoke to me, I walked the rest of the way home with my son, and there was a friend waiting for me in front of my house. She was waiting on my stairs. And this friend, her mother had taken care of my son when he was a baby while I worked. And so she was my babysitter, and she allowed me to work because she was sort of like a grandmother figure. I always felt like my son was in such good hands with her because she loved him. She bathed him. She fed him. She was the mother that I couldn't be when I was at work. I knew he was okay with her, that she
Hmm.
had, I don't
Mhm.
know, she had like 20 grandchildren or something. Like the woman knew what she was doing. Um, so I was
Nice.
so thankful for her, but her daughter was there that day waiting for me at my house to ask if I would sit with her mother because unfortunately she had fallen ill with leukemia. So I said yes. And this happened directly after I met with the messenger, but I didn't connect the two immediately. I just thought, okay, you're putting me to work. Great. Like, thank you, And so I did sit with her while her children were working, and she eventually did pass away, but it was a gift to be with her. Although I didn't have any medical medium tools, I didn't know how to help her heal. I was just company, that's all I could be at that time.
And that's
Yeah,
really powerful. I want to
totally.
bring up how Sophia and I studied at the Barbara Brennan School of Healing, and Barbara talks about one of the most powerful things you can do for somebody who is on their deathbed is sit there in your authentic self.
Hmm.
So she has a technique where she connects, you connect with your true essence of who you are, and you upwell it and you bring it all around you. And that's very comforting to just be you. No other,
Yeah.
nothing else. Just sit there and be in the energy of you is very helpful to somebody in that spot. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did.
That
Yeah.
makes me feel a lot better because all these years I'm like, why was I so useless? Like I could have done so many things, but I didn't know. But yeah, that makes me feel good.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, the gift of presence. It's a powerful one.
mhm. So there was a good 16 years before anything else significant happened. I mean, I moved to Florida and I never saw the messenger again after that day until 16, 17 years later. And I ended up getting sick in 2020. I had COVID and came very close to dying. And after that, just chronic illness for a long time. Well, I say a long time, but other people have been sick a lot longer. I only spent 2 years, but 2 years felt like an eternity because it was hell. It
Yeah,
was,
Yeah, it's hard to quantify the suffering based on time.
I
It's different
agree.
for everybody. So, did you meet the messenger, as he's called, again before you got sick, or for the
no.
second time after you got sick? After you
No,
got sick.
and
Okay.
while I was sick, this is something that stuck with me because I was just in a state of complete despair at one point because I had interstitial cystitis, which is just chronic, excruciating pain of the bladder.
Wow.
And of course, doctors were telling me, you're going to have to live with this the rest of your life. We don't have a cure. I had chronic UTI and I wasn't responding well to antibiotics. I was having life threatening reactions to them, and they were also just not effective anymore for me. And on top of that, I had weakness in extremities, neurological fatigue, medical medium calls it, and just going down the stairs. I had trouble with my legs felt like wet spaghetti when I would walk. At one point, just lifting my hand was like lifting like a huge weight or something, it was just
Hmm.
terrible. And like I couldn't take care of my children. My husband had to do all the work. Just cooking in the kitchen felt impossible because just by the time I got everything else out to cook, I'm just like, okay, I have to go lay down. And so it was just life was impossible. But during these times when I literally was just like, I don't want to live like this. If I have to live like this, I don't want to live anymore. And that wasn't like me because I was always able to see the light, in a dark place. I was always able to be optimistic and see the bright side and, be silly literally at funerals, like th-
Hmm.
I'm a silly person, and so it was very unlike me to just say, if this is how I have to live, I don't want to live anymore, but in those times, I would just feel like, where are you, God? Like, why is this happening to me? Like, is there even a God that this is happening to me? Like, I would question my faith and I would just feel so like such a dark, sad place.
And that's
Mm.
huge right there. Like that is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
if you've never experienced chronic illness to that level, it's hard to really get it. I get it. That's huge. It's huge to go to that place. I mean, it
Yeah.
really says how much you were suffering, because obviously you didn't want that, but it starts to seem like a better alternative to
Right.
continuing day in and day out with that level of suffering and not having the answers.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to jump on a tangent here, a very important tangent for the listeners who don't yet know who medical medium is. In a nutshell, he is a guy named Anthony William who hears a voice outside of his head by the name of Spirit of Compassion. And since he was 4 years old, Spirit of Compassion has been diagnosing people all around him and telling Anthony how they can heal, usually with food and supplements. And Anthony is in his 60s now, so he's been doing this his whole life. He started publishing books in 2015, and he just has so much information, and he has healed
Mhm.
millions of people around the world who are all enthusiastically telling their stories like we are, for no other reason than the faith that we have after having gone through what he calls hell and back.
Yeah.
So as far as what Spirit of Compassion tells him in regards to hell, he doesn't say there's, brimstone and fire. He says hell is being on this planet, being in such deep suffering without the answers. And that sounds
Yeah.
like exactly what I walked through. It's what you've walked through. And it's incredible to come back from that place.
And I think, yeah, without the answers, we start to lose hope. And that's what Anthony speaks about. But we are resilient and we can come back and our faith is restored. And I think you'll tell us more about that, how you restored your faith.
Yeah. And so that experience sort of during those dark times that when I would question, I'd say, if there's no God, how did a stranger call me by name? How did a stranger
Right.
walk up to me right after my prayer and say that God would direct my footsteps?
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yep.
no other explanation. My husband, he wants more faith, but he lacks faith. And I told him the story, and he believed it because it came from me and he knew I wouldn't lie to him. But at the same time, he doubted, because it didn't happen to him. And even though believing, it's like he still didn't have the faith that it actually happened. Like he believed that I believed it happened, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
That he wasn't sure that it was the reality until he met the messenger. Because 16 years had passed after I started healing with medical medium and I regained my health and I was able to play with my kids again and I was able to be my silly self again and my connection with God grew stronger and all of these wonderful things started happening. I went back to visit my father and just in that town, it just occurred to me and I said, I really want to see if I can find this guy and just thank him for the message he gave me because it really gave me strength in hard times. And so my husband's like, yeah. And so we're in the car and I'm praying and I'm just like, God, if it's your will, please help me find this guy's house. Like I generally knew the area. I knew that it was this house or that house. They didn't know if he still lived there. It was just, it'd been so long. So we start approaching it and I say, I think that's the house. And then I saw a figure in the doorway and I said, someone's standing there. And I start waving at the door and I just jump out of the car. I go, his yard is fenced in. So I go and run to the gate and he comes out to the gate and I start just like thanking him and telling him what happened. And he's nodding. And then he tells me, I'm known as the messenger in this neighborhood.
Oh, man.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah, and later I said, "Why were you at that door at that precise moment?" And he said, "I heard the Lord tell me to get up and go to the door."
Incredible.
Wow. That
Incredible.
is so cool.
Yeah, I'm like, "That's so amazing." And so we're still in touch. He texts me he speaks in Bible verses. I will literally send him just, well, I haven't done this lately, but I would just send him my questions, my doubts, things in the Bible that didn't make sense to me, looking for direction, and send him this huge paragraph. And he would reply with like 2 lines of scripture. Just,
Oh, powerful.
what?
That's his
What am I supposed
strong
to say?
faith.
Definitely.
Yeah.
At first, I was upset. No,
I want more. Yeah. Need
Yeah,
more
right.
details.
but I've learned to understand him and, have patience. But I'm thankful for still being in touch with him. And I'm obviously just thankful for how God worked through him that day. And it's amazing. So,
I love how your prayer was answered again, like praying, God, if it's in your will, please
Yes.
help me find this guy. And
yeah,
then you did, and he was standing.
yeah,
It's like, wow, just
yeah.
instant answers to prayers. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I would develop my faith. If our prayers are answered right in front of our face, I mean, we really then can believe that God hears us and Anthony speaks about that too, is that all of our words are heard, but it's so nice to have that confirmation.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
So when you met him a second time, how far along were you in your healing journey? Were you like feeling pretty good at that point, or still at the beginning of it? Or
I was feeling pretty good. My interstitial cystitis had totally resolved itself. No more pain at all in my bladder, no more chronic UTI. I had most of my energy back, pretty much back to normal. That's the miracle of medical medium information.
Mhm.
Like, after trying everything, seeing so many doctors, so many specialists, just researching, like, I researched 10 hours straight some days, just trying to find anything that would help me. And actually, that's how I found medical medium, because there was a YouTube video of this silly girl on YouTube. I think it was like Banana Blondie or something like that. And she was talking about her interstitial cystitis. And she's like, there's this guy, he hears a voice. I don't freaking know if he really hears a voice. Whatever. Like, and she's like, I tried it, and she's like, it worked. And so, like, it was just her authenticity,
Mhm.
of the video that made me think, okay, this girl's telling the truth. Like, the way she talked about it, she's telling the truth. So, I'm like, okay, medical medium. Who's medical medium? Like, I start looking at it, and at this point, you know, you'll try anything. And
Mhm.
and so I bought a book. The book came, and I opened the book, and just as soon as you start reading the book, there's just this knowing inside of you. It's just
Mhm.
the Holy
Yeah.
Spirit confirms to you that this is not just another self-help book. It's not just another trendy diet or something. It's not something that comes and goes. These are words, these are living words that heal, that are from
Mhm.
above, that we could not possibly know. Because
Yes.
he talks about
Yeah.
things in such detail, such
Such
detail.
detail.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing.
It is.
Mind
There's
blowing. Like,
how could he know? Yeah, unless he had the word of God, and I love that you use living words. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
yeah, I think he says that in his book. And like, he was explaining not only what was wrong with me, but why I
Mhm.
liked eggs in particular and why I felt that was good for my Crohn's condition and why that was a misbelief. And like, he answered every one of my
Yeah.
questions I didn't even know I had. And I'm just curious, it sounds like you were really open at that point, but did you have any mental blocks as far as him being or calling himself a medium or hearing a voice? Was that at all like an issue that you had to look past at the beginning, or not so
You
much?
know, I feel like his work speaks for itself, and
Mm-hmm.
his actions speak for themselves.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really need to be too much in your head about the word medium, because when you look at the person and just how compassionate they are with their
Mm-hmm.
time and their generosity and their entire life, he's
Yeah.
dedicated his
Yeah.
entire life to the chronically ill.
Yes.
And not putting paywalls in front of it, getting it all out there for as free or cheap as possible. And
Definitely not for the money,
Yeah.
because you couldn't pay someone to work that hard.
right. Yeah.
Couldn't it?
Yeah.
That's
It's
so
like
true.
7 days a week.
Yeah,
He's so passionate too when he speaks. I mean,
yeah,
he wants to get that message out, and he has such authenticity in his voice
yeah,
when he talks about all this stuff, and
yes.
he's lighthearted about it too, which is funny. I love his sense of humor.
yeah.
I think that's key too, because people who suffer from chronic illness, they have enough seriousness in their life.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
they can't really laugh and be lighthearted. When I was sick, I didn't laugh for a long time. I remember the first time I started laughing, I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't laughed in so long.
Wow.
Oh.
And so him being lighthearted is so
Yeah.
important for people to feel that while they're suffering, seeing
Mhm.
this
Mm-hmm.
person, showing them how to get out of it and be lighthearted in the process, I think is really important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
He's such an inspiration to me in all of the ways. I could
Yes.
talk for 45 minutes about all the different things I've noticed and I've learned from him, inspired by him. So,
Yeah, he's
yeah,
teaching us all.
it really
Yes,
is.
he
And I
is.
can't believe earlier you said that he's in his 60s. I just can't believe that he's in his 60s, because He
I know,
doesn't look
right?
older. He doesn't act like it. Not that 60 is old, but I'm just saying he looks really good for his age, especially
Definitely.
with the
Yeah.
amount that he works,
Hmm.
speaking all the time and dedicating himself to this work. He looks amazing for
Yep.
what he does.
Truly. And,
Yep.
several times in his work, one of them being asparagus, a big one, he talks about anti-agers. And, he's like living proof of his own work and the things he
Yes.
teaches. Cause yeah, he doesn't look 60 at all.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
on the flip side, all the things that we take that do age us, like the salts, the vinegar, the caffeine, things that just the world is accustomed to being normal. These are the things that age us,
Yes.
and he's bringing that to light so that people can find that information. It's just amazing. He helps us stay young at heart.
Exactly. Yep.
Totally.
Such gratitude. He's actually got
Yes.
a picture of him. It's off camera, but yep, so much he means to me. So that's your story, and it's truly an amazing story, like so inspirational. Um, so what's next in your life? You just are spreading this faith and this joy, and you're telling people about medical medium, and where are you
Well,
at now with it all?
there's a lot of unknown, I guess I'd say. I have sort of I've just felt lately that something's coming and I don't know what? And I have this spirit of anticipation and I'm just spending time trying to prepare myself, doing the cleanses, medical medium information, eating the healing foods, the living foods, praying every day, just reading the word, trying to grow closer with God because I know that something's coming. I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's bad, but I just feel like something's coming. I don't know. And then saying it for a while, to my children, they probably think I'm nuts.
But that's like my
Whatever.
whole family. I've been
Yeah.
saying the same thing my whole, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really, I don't know what it is either. I have ideas, but I do think prayer is an important part. Like I
Yeah.
wonder how much we can shift it through prayer.
Yeah. And it may be something bad that's coming, but for some reason I feel excited. And I don't know because maybe I just feel excited because God's on our side and we're in the right place. And I don't know, but I feel a spirit of anticipation and I feel excited about the future. I have hope for the future. And
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say too, I had a dream about a month ago where something big is coming and we didn't know what it was in the dream and we were trying to figure it out. So something
Wow.
big must be coming. I mean, we're all getting that message and
That's amazing. And so every year I go visit my father now. I went 5 years without seeing him, and so I told him, "Every year I'm gonna come visit you," and that's when I go visit the messenger now. I've seen him now
awesome.
twice, and
Nice.
this past time that I saw him was in November, and, he prayed over my husband and I, and he said, "We're in a time when we can expect miracle." He said, "We can
Mm.
always
Wow.
expect miracles, but especially during this time." And,
Wow.
I just
so
got chills.
what do we
That's
got?
awesome.
Yeah, so I like miracles. I like seeing miracles.
Who
Us too.
doesn't? Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, my take on it is whether it's can be called good or bad, whatever
Mhm.
it is, it's leading to something good. If it's bad, it's like something has to be torn down to make room for new. And
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
also feel very hopeful about the future, and
Mhm.
especially with all of us coming together to share our faith and our love and light that we've gained through our own healing and with the medical medium information. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
powerful stuff. Changed the world. And now, as part of your video on Facebook, you played some audio of Anthony talking about people coming out on the other side and how they changed the world. And there's so many different areas of the world in which you can affect change. And even if it's
Yeah.
small, it's not so small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all powerful. So we're
Yeah.
all
It's all
part of that.
all
And he's
meaningful. Yeah.
yeah, and he says he can't do it alone. He wants to arm us with the information to bring to others who are suffering, and so I think God works through all of us to bring that information to people who need it.
Yeah.
Um, like
Definitely.
even even just in a church. I recently moved, so I'm at a new church now. But in the old church that I was going to, there was this woman, and her son had some very rare disease where they need multiple surgeries, and it just progresses throughout life and gets really ugly. And her son was friends with my son. They're in middle school together. And I just felt this overwhelming feeling to give her a medical medium book, but
Wow.
at church. So I wrapped it in Christmas paper.
Oh,
Nice.
awesome.
But it was July. But like, what sticks out more, Christmas paper at church or a book that says medium on it at church? Right?
Right.
Christmas paper is all I had. So I wrapped it in Christmas paper and I'm just like, here you go.
Way
You
to
know?
stay true to
Awesome.
yourself and find a
Yeah.
way.
And I
That's
think,
awesome.
God works through us in different ways. Like we'll be at the grocery store and we see someone by the celery and, God shows us what to say to that person. Or we meet someone and it just so happens to come up. Or like just, I really believe God works through all of us.
I
And it's
agree.
really important work. So,
Yep, I
I'm
agree.
right there with you.
Yep.
And yeah, so many opportunities, but grocery stores are an amazing one. People are always like, why do you have 30 bunches of celery? Why do you have 8 leaves of aloe? What do you do with that aloe? And
I
then you
thought
spark up a conversation.
I thought
Yes.
about applying in the produce department at the grocery store just so I could like give like little hints to people. Like
That's a great
Nice.
critical
idea.
celery. Yeah. But
That's what Anthony did.
I think I might get fired.
I don't know. I think that's a great idea.
Worth a try,
Yeah,
I'd
I
say.
mean, all the smiles and all the love that you'll share with people, and then they'll come looking for you, and then you'll just be seen as a great employee.
Yeah, maybe.
Aw. I also think that God or the divine puts us in places. Certain people work, in business or hospitals or whatever, and so we are in various places around the world to spread the messages as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Uh, there's no limit to that. That's why I
Yeah.
put out a tow truck driving episode, just to show how I found spirituality infused in that work even. So
I'll
Yeah.
have to check that out.
since we're all about, the divine signs and synchronicities on this podcast, I found it really synchronistic that we had this talk scheduled and the medical medium came out with a podcast episode a day or two ago that we just listened to this morning. And it was all about this. It was about
Yeah.
wavering faith and then the importance of bringing it back and then how that spreads to other people. And so we're right in line with the pulse he's on with what we're putting out into the world, which is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at this point in the podcast, to wrap it up, we like to do something we call the soulful send off, where we just say something from our soul, from our heart to the listeners. And I'll start. And what I want to say after listening to your story, Anela, is first of all, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It takes courage to put something so personal out in a public space, especially with strangers who just hit you up on the internet. So I recognize all that, and I'm very, very grateful for your willingness to be here and share. And I just am completely inspired anew with a desire to pray and to align with God's will and to spread my faith, because I know so many people are suffering and their faith wavers, and hold the light for them. So if you're one of those people, hang on, check out Medical Medium, and God will be there for you.
Would you like to jump in, Anela, or shall I go?
I could share something. Today during my prayer time, I asked that God give me something for today. And I opened it and it was Jesus's words. He said, "Peace be with you." And so I've been thinking of that all day. Peace be with you. Like, I say it to myself. I imagine it in my head when I look at people, projecting that onto them. And I think that goes a long way. It's
I
awesome.
love it. I love it. That's huge. I mean, people feel the unspoken intentions and thoughts, and I think it's important. I recognize that.
And I can feel that as you presence it. Yeah. The simple but yet very effective words. I think for me, today has changed me between our podcast here and then the synchronicity of listening to Medical Medium talking about faith and how important that is, and how we can all do better if we see a lack of faith in our lives. Presencing that and then having the intention to do better and to change that for ourselves. And I feel more inspired to pray and to grow my faith after doing this podcast. So thank you so much for sharing your
That's
stories
beautiful.
with us.
That's beautiful.
And if there's
Um,
anybody that's like, okay, sounds like a cool concept, how do I get my faith back? He has a very real exercise you can do in the Medical Medium podcast
yes.
episode that you can check out and return to periodically. So
Yeah.
just throw that out there. But yeah, again, Anela, thank you so much
Thank
for being
you.
here.
Thank you for having
And
me. Great to tell
yeah,
the story.
Visit us at aspenroots.love.